Welcome. I see we have a growing group of people joining us. Thank you for making the time today. We're really excited and have an amazing group of speakers. We are so grateful to have the opportunity to connect with folks from far and wide, from living rooms across the Coachella Valley. My name's Ashley Metzger. I am the Outreach and Conservation Manager for Desert Water Agency here in Palm Springs. Just want to go over a few housekeeping items. We cannot hear or see any of you attendees. The panelists are the only ones who have the option to turn their camera and their microphone on and off. So feel free, it is the lunch hour. If you are hungry and want to grab a snack, if you need to take a quick break at any point, if you need to hit the restroom, whatever you need to be comfortable. This webinar is being recorded. It's going to be on Facebook Live as well as Desert Water Agency's website and YouTube channel. So you can always pop back in to see what you missed. If you're having any difficulties and you need technical support, please use the chat feature. Generally, the features appear at the bottom of your screen. There's also a Q&A button that you're welcome to use for questions for any of our speakers today. And we will get to those questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to drop them in throughout. We're going to go ahead and get our welcome poll started as people continue to join. So we just want to get an idea for who's in the virtual room, if you will. So question number one of our poll, have you attended a DWA workshop in the past? So we have a bunch of different options here. Yeah, you've been to a workshop before, but only in person. Perhaps you've been to one online, or maybe you've been to both, or this is your very first. And then the next question is, what best describes you? Are you a resident with your own yard, an HOA resident or board member, property manager, a landscape pro, a water agency employee or board member, or other? And if you click on that other button, if you wouldn't mind going to the chat and letting us know who you are so that we have a better idea for who's in the room. And additionally, if you are a landscape professional and you would like to be added to our landscape professional list, go ahead and type your name, company, and contact information into the chat, or you can email it to us, and we will add you to our list of landscapers that we maintain on our website. And that's just helpful for folks who are interested in doing projects that may not know where to start with a contractor. As a government agency, we can't recommend anybody, but we can let folks know who has attended our events in the past. And then the last poll question, how long have you lived or wintered in the Coachella Valley? So you don't live here, maybe you're from out of town, you've been here just a short amount of time, less than a year, 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 years or longer. So get those answers in. We'll give you about 10 more seconds, and then we're going to share the results. All right, so it seems that for 48% of our attendees, this is the first webinar. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We're really excited to have you. And it looks like we've got pretty much an even split between residents with their own yard and HOAs. That's pretty typical here in Palm Springs. We have a lot of homeowners associations, so glad to see that they're well represented. And then in terms of how long folks have lived in the Coachella Valley, it looks like we have a lot of folks who have been here 1 to 5 years, and then a lot of long timers, 11 years or longer. So thank you for filling out our poll here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So before we dive into any of our speakers, we wanted to share with you a bit about Desert Water Agency's grass removal incentive, since that's what we're here to talk about today. It's important to give you that information. So in the chat, we're going to send out a link to www.dwa.org/save, which is where you can apply for that incentive. And then the incentive is pretty basic. We've had the same rules now for a couple years, but they did change drastically about 2 years ago. So if you haven't learned about our program updates recently, the latest and greatest is that it's $2 per square foot for front, back, and side yards. You must have grass in place when you're applying. You're able to use artificial turf to replace that grass if you'd like. And you've got 90 days to complete your project if it's for a single family home, or 180 days if it's for commercial or HOA. And do not start your project before you get approval from us. It's very important. We're using state and federal grant funding for these projects, and the audit requirements are very intense. So we have to have very thorough documentation. We cannot approve a project if the grass has already been taken out. So that's very important. Applying is primarily done online. We do have paper applications if you really need one, but I really encourage you to try and do it online. It's very simple, streamlined. We can get it done quickly. So this was just my mock application here. This was page 1. We get all your details. As you can see, it's not very intensive. We don't need social security numbers. And then on the next page there, it's just really basic questions about your areas, front yard and backyard. Are you using a plan? How many square feet are you requesting in each area? And then a photo. Additionally, for homeowners associations, we do ask for a map. And that's really just so that when we go out on inspections, we know the proper areas for us to measure. So you'll see after that step, you submit your application. And once you hit submit, it sends it over to us, and we contact you to schedule an appointment to come out and measure. And we do some of the measuring remotely through Google Earth, but we do come in on site to make sure, A, that there's still grass there, and B, that the Google Earth measurement makes sense. So for some example, if you have a lot of trees in your yard, getting an accurate measure using satellite data is very difficult. So we do like to do those field measurements too. And then we have another poll that we're going to pop up here before we get into our first speaker. So if we could share that poll with our attendees here. We want to know, before we speak to our first expert on grass removal, do you have plans to remove grass? Yes, you do within the next 6 months. Yes, maybe a little further down the road. No, you're not sure. Or hey, maybe it doesn't apply to you. Maybe you're a landscaper. And then question number 2, if you plan to remove grass, are you going to DIY? Are you going to rip it out yourself? And for that question, we're looking really more for the removal component of the project. So maybe you are going to have a landscaper put the new plants in, but you will be doing the removal yourself. So if we could give you about 10 more seconds to fill that out. We are going to show you the results there. Okay, so it looks like about a little over half of people do have active plans to remove grass, with the majority of them being a little more than 6 months away. So you guys are planners. If you're here and you're not even planning to do this for 6 months, that's great. Get all the information you can, and we look forward to helping you. This is a great time of year to do these projects. So for those of you who are doing it soon, wonderful. We love seeing folks do these projects where they can plant the new materials in the fall, because that's really the best time of year for almost any plant material to go in the ground in the desert. And then if you plan to remove grass, will you remove it yourself? We've got a brave 15 or so % of people that said yes, they will do it themselves. And then for the others, gardeners or landscapers will do it. Our next speaker, Dick and Patty Reed, will talk about the options for grass removal, whether you're doing it yourself or you're having your landscaper doing it. It's really important to understand the different methodologies and what to expect. We are so pleased to have Dick and Patty Reed. They are both master gardeners who have been in the Coachella Valley for a very long time, both retired teachers, and they have made incredible headway in their own yard here. So without further ado, Dick and Patty, if you can get your camera up and take over.
Thank you. We're going to screen share here with our project. And welcome to everyone. As Ashley said, we are both master gardeners with the University of California Cooperative Extension. Our mission is to bring research-based horticulture information to the public. That's you. And it's primarily for private people, not for businesses. If you have questions that are not answered today that you would like to have answered, contact our Master Gardener helpline. I've put the address on the screen. It's ANRMG Indio at ucanr.edu. We'll be sharing with you today turf removal. This is what our project is, the getting rid of the grass that you have. We'll start a little bit with our backstory, and then we'll cover about 4 ways to remove the turf, our own process, that is the one that we used, and then some considerations. When we moved to Palm Desert about 30 years ago, we had the typical yard covered with gravel, underlaid by black plastic. We removed about half of that gravel in our front yard and planted a lawn of beautiful hybrid Bermuda, the tiff green variety, and reshaped the planter and the bed in front that you can see with the pine tree, which was there already. We lined it all with pavers, and we, of course, laid new irrigation lines because that's very important when you're re-landscaping. We wanted to make our home more family friendly, and we wanted a place to plant and to play. And we had roses in the front that were growing wonderfully with all of the available water we had at the time. Of course, those situations have changed. In the backyard, we had a small side yard, the kitchen yard, also planted in hybrid Bermuda, but the rest of the backyard was the common Bermuda that you will find in many circumstances, and that's what we'll be talking about today.
So the longer we lived here, the more we fell in love with desert plants. And as you can see, this is what happened when we planted a very small smoke tree from the living desert and then did not water it after 6 months. So you can have beautiful desert plants without using a lot of water. So when you are considering removing your turf, you need to consider your budget. And as Ashley said, wonderful, that's a great rebate from the water company and any other incentives, what kind of materials you will need to remove your turf, and then please check into the ordinances in your city, county, state, and of course, your homeowners association. I'm going to share 3 methods to start off with. And before we do that, I would suggest that first you determine what kind of grass you have, because your choice of turf removal will be dependent upon the kind of grass you have. Okay, so the first one, very eco-friendly, is called solarization. It basically sterilizes the soil and at the same time kills seeds and weeds and grass. To do it, you need clear plastic, which can be purchased at big box stores. and have that ready to go. So cut your grass short, water it, cover it with heavy clear plastic sheeting, not black, and anchor it in place so it's almost airtight. Then just leave it, don't touch it, leave it there 4 to 8 weeks until the grass is dead. Remove and discard the plastic, and you should be ready to go to remove the turf and do your new landscaping. It does not, however, work well with Bermuda grass. Another very eco-friendly way is layering. It's very low cost and it's easy for any homeowner to do. It involves cutting the grass short. Again, that's pretty typical with all of these methods. Watering the grass, and then the space where you want to remove grass and do something else, cover it with untreated cardboard or your newspapers. Just don't use anything glossy or that has tape on it, paint, that kind of thing. Then you wet all of those things down and cover it with at least 6 inches of mulch. As the mulch sits on top and you water it, the cardboard and the newspaper will disintegrate. The very easy thing about this is these materials cost you nothing. They're easy to manipulate. You can cut holes in them so that you can plant in that space. If you look at the bottom right corner, you'll see what it looks like. The grass has died. You can pull up the cardboard, the mulch is on top. You're ready to go. The cardboard and the newspaper will eventually disintegrate and just become part of the mulch. Unfortunately, that is not very effective with Bermuda grass either. Mechanical removal is really going to help you get that turf out of place so that you are left with just bare soil. For that, if you want to go the least expensive way, I saw a few people who were planning to do it themselves. You can always go the old shuffle method and just cut it out yourself. More often, people will rent a sod cutter, which will cut your turf into strips. You roll them up and take them to the dump. It's labor intensive, and you, as it shows in this picture, if you want to reduce the weight of those strips of turf, you'll want to let the grass die and let the soil dry out as well. This only works with grasses like fescues and ryegrass and bluegrass. This is a part of the process you use if you kill the Bermuda grass first.
So that's what we'll talk about now, getting rid of the common Bermuda grass. As you can see by the picture, that Bermuda will invade wherever there is water. And if you've left any stubs or roots or sprigs and it gets water, that grass will take over and you'll be chasing it forever. So we used the method, the fourth method, using herbicides. It's the most successful method of eradicating Bermuda grass and the hybrids. It is absorbed by the plants and it goes all the way down and kills the roots, which is important with Bermuda, which has roots that can go as deep as 3 feet or more. The grass has to be in an active growth stage. So do this in the spring or the summer or early fall. Cut the grass short, water it well, allow it to dry so the glyphosate will stick. Spray it with glyphosate. This has the least impact environmentally. It doesn't last in the soil. But please follow the label directions precisely. Use your protective clothing, long sleeved shirt, long pants, full covered shoes, a eye covering, and perhaps a spray covering of some type, maybe even a mask. But be careful not to spray if there's any wind, because that will drift and it will kill anything close. So keep this overspray protected. Don't water it again until the grass looks dead, then wait and see if any emerges. Repeat as necessary. Eventually, just remove the dead turf by hand or mechanically. The front yard of our house looked like this. It was that hybrid Bermuda. And before the kill process, this was the backyard during the kill process. That was the common Bermuda area. And take a note of the trees. The front yard after the kill with the glyphosate. It only took one time there because the hybrid is not quite as invasive. The backyard, however, was the common Bermuda and took a couple of applications. When you're done, you remove the dead sod. Our landscaper decided to use a Bobcat loader, much faster, had to use handwork, especially in the backyard. And it's important to get rid of any underlayment of the gravel mulch. That's important so that the soil can accept moisture.
Okay, so once they have done that, in order to keep weeds from growing up through your new mulch, whether it is decomposed granite or an organic thing, it's often recommended that you install a weed barrier. And the preferred kind is a fabric so that the air can circulate and water can penetrate down into the soil. We want to give you one caveat. This tree was in grass, and so its roots were very shallow and spread out beyond the drip line. And we did not take that into consideration when we installed the irrigation for the tree. Well, what happened was those roots were not getting the water they needed, and we killed it. So if you're leaving mature plants in your new landscaping, please be very cognizant that you're going to have to find a way to get water to those roots that have been used to being in the lawn and getting water that way.
You'll hear more about this later from another presenter, but some of our plants that we aimed toward having, you can see there, are pretty much desert-friendly plants, if not desert natives. We did have some plants that were still in the ground, and we wanted to work around those, like our tree.
So one of the things people often use, and as master gardeners, we are really focused on this, grasses. They're absolutely beautiful, but please choose some that are not invasive. The red fountain grass is excellent. The African fountain grass is really destroying the local ecosystem wildly, and you will spend the rest of your time in your home plucking out sprouts from the fountain grass. So please, please don't use that.
Well, okay. I'm not going to go forward. There we go.
Okay, so just
so our yard is, we're about to finish up here. This is our yard after we were done with our landscaping. As I said, we had a professional landscaper. This is the immediately after. A year later, our plants had started to grow, and we were blessed with not only water-wise foliage, but also rainbows. This is our yard now, 5 years later. Our drought-tolerant plants are still thriving, and Patty wants to remind you that we have no
Bermuda in 5 years. Okay, thank you so much. Hope this was helpful.
And
thank you. Thank you so much, Dick and Patty. We really appreciate hearing your story about your transformation and really the first step in the process, which is removing grass. We are going to next speak with Mr. Tom Dosey. He is the leader of TKD, which is a landscape design firm. And we have had the extreme pleasure of working with Tom Dosey on a number of projects. He helped us design our butterfly garden, most recently at Desert Water Agency. He has many accolades here on the screen, award-winning designs, and he is the past president of the Desert Chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. He's also just a delight to work with. So Tom, we'd like to welcome you to talk about design. So now that we've got that grass out, where are we going to go from here? Tom, you can talk to us a bit about that.
Thank you, Ashley. It's my privilege to be part of this great panel. We bring through the panel a variety of experiences. I've been practicing landscape architecture in the Coachella Valley for the past 35 years. And our projects range from residential design all the way through commercial buildings, and including the recently completed downtown Palm Springs project. So we're very proud of some of the projects we've had the privilege to be involved with. With that, I'm going to speak a little bit to some of the referrals that we saw that there are a number of HOA people on this webinar as well as residents. So I'm going to touch on both of those areas so that you can kind of see what the design process we go through as landscape architects when we begin a turf conversion. A lot of our expertise lies in, the ability to come to a site and see the opportunities and what the constraints are. And it's a lot of times is working with existing materials that have been there. Sometimes we don't have to start brand new and take everything out. If we see opportunities for different elements to remain and work with those, we certainly like to do that. And as well as looking at the different architectural styles and trends in landscape design. So there's a lot of ways to become water efficient without everything just being bare rock and a few cactuses. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation here. Our office is currently located in Rancho Mirage. And some of the basics for beginning to design a water efficient landscape include planning and budgeting. Then we begin with the project design. And in many cases, there's phasing, particularly if it's a HOA project or even on a residential, whatever the budget allows. And then as our other speaker has talked about, there's the turf and plant removal, reviewing the irrigation system to see the best way to adapt the existing irrigation system to the new water efficient irrigation system. And then the types of plants and the installation. And then also, what are we going to use to cover the surface of the soil once the planting is completed? On a lot of our recent projects, and some of you might have this experience too, is the rock material and the other materials that are placed on the ground sometimes are higher in cost than even the plant material. So it's a big factor because there's all different types of rocks and sizes and materials, and they all have a different cost associated with them depending on the type and colors and sizes of the rocks. And then we have a plant establishment period, and then we also we want to really focus on the proper maintenance. Many of us have seen beautiful landscapes designed, installed, and then only to not have the proper maintenance, and they don't take on the the look that we want. Why hire a landscape architect? Landscape architects have a 4 or 5 year degree from accredited college, then a 2-year apprenticeship, state exam and licensing, and the knowledge of the site. So not only do we design with plants and irrigation, but also hardscape. We prepare plans and specifications for competitive bidding and construction. So what our clients end up with is a set of documents that they can take to a number of different contractors and get competitive bids for the same project. So it basically keeps homeowners or HOAs in the area of bidding apples for apples and they have an idea or a clear understanding of what the final design product is going to be. And then we also have the knowledge of the construction and installation. So beginning, we want to start with determining the goals and needs and objectives of our clients. So the water conservation, the purpose of the landscape, is it an outdoor living space? Is it curb appeal, lower water use, reducing maintenance, and also more of an updated theme in landscaping? Trends have changed over the years from the different, as they have in home styles, landscape styles have changed over the years as well. And so we work with the client to determine the landscape theme and character. We help them or work with them to establish a construction budget and perhaps project phasing. And then also review the availability of rebate programs and the timing, as was addressed earlier. So we begin with a client meeting to discuss the nature of the project, the formal, informal. We do a thorough site analysis to review existing landscape materials, the views, sun orientation, wind, other environmental factors. Then we develop a preliminary design concept, and then we start looking at plant materials and other materials that we're going to use as components of the landscape project itself. And then we discuss the best way to approach irrigation design and also landscape lighting and proper maintenance. So this is an example. I use this as kind of a test case here for a larger project, but this is the downtown Hilton in Palm Springs. This was the original layout and design of it. And you can see the massive amount of turf within this project. And so when we go to the site, we take various photos so that we have a good inventory and begin our design ideas working off of not only the site visit, but photographs that we take of different areas that we think are of interest. In this instance, we were identifying the horizontal character of the architecture as well. So that plays into the type of plant selection and design that we may come up with. And then we begin to put together an idea. This is just an illustration of how we've designed. We wanted to accentuate the project corners because that's the visibility that the hotel has from the streets. So we had some major areas and minor areas, but we try to clue in on the different focal points of the project to accentuate the architecture and have interest in the development. So we reviewed, here's the existing corner as it looked. We felt there was an opportunity to work with this. And also you see in the background, the tall trees, they're totally out of the picture. So that tells us either they need to be removed or we need to add some lower plant material at eye level that will help reinforce the design. Here again, we have some palm trees that start to make a nice focal point. We can build on that. Signage is important to accentuate the hotel sign. And then, especially now with the trend, we were looking at using desert accent plants to silhouette against this blank wall. So here is your traditional landscape. Everything's lined up, the turf goes up. There's a few little areas of flowers, but we looked at this as an opportunity. And we came up with an overall landscape design concept to give it a new, fresh look, a very simplified design, create those focal points we talked about, and then reinforce the architecture and create some opportunities for night lighting effects. So we developed a couple different concepts for the outside that was presented to our client. This one includes some ground covers. Here we had a flowing pattern of rock. And then we developed some renderings to kind of give the client an idea of what the project would look like towards the final installation. And this was that corner that we looked at earlier as another opportunity. And on larger scale projects such as this, or even streetscapes or HOA, you want to keep some simplicity to the design. The way you would design your backyard with perhaps more varieties of plant, it's a more of an intimate space. Streetscapes and large thoroughfares and buildings should have more of a simplicity and a rhythm and pattern to the design. You don't want to make each project a botanical garden. We wanted to incorporate the night lighting effects. So this is that same area after the installation. There's 3 types of rock: large rock, decomposed granite, and then about a 3/4 inch rock. And then when we talked about the night lighting effects, you can see how we use the building as a backdrop to accentuate the desert plants and create these patterns of light and shadow on the building for more interest. These same principles apply to even a small courtyard, but we'll develop a couple different concepts. We may do some renderings to show some examples of how the project might look. Right now, with the trend in modernism, this is an existing project in Palm Desert. We felt that we wanted the architecture to show more clearly. We wanted to remove the turf. So we showed them how we could reveal more of the building and provide a more landscape design that complemented the architecture. This is before, kind of after rendering. And just how we can get rid of turf areas and then large streetscapes for HOAs and communities. Again, we look at the scale and the speed of traffic as it goes by this project. And, you know, we develop a plan. We present this to the HOA and the board members. We show the different plant materials that we're going to be utilizing to create the patterns we talked about. So we always come up with a plan, and that way we can do some preliminary cost estimating. Here's another project where we just looked at potential conversion areas. The whole area didn't need conversion, but if we could save this much, we did an estimate of saving over 5 million gallons of water per year. We've done calculations for different HOAs. This is the springs on what the desert landscape will save them in terms of water and money versus the existing lawn. Develop some character renderings. This is one of our favorite. This is the Desert Water Agency before. These are some streetscape projects. And you can see the simplicity. And if you space the plants properly, I tend to a more natural look in the landscape, but you can see how these plants cover large areas. So in the initial install, you know, it didn't look like there was very many plants here, but then as it fills in and allowed to grow, proper spacing is so important. These are some median islands before and after. You can see they were kind of boring in the beginning, and then afterwards, much more colorful, all on drip irrigation. This is the Desert Water Agency after our design. And then on irrigation systems, we can use some drip bubblers. We can use for flower beds, the drip tubing, emitters. This is an example of flowers that were placed on spray irrigation. You can see the damage to the pavement and the flowers aren't doing well. And then on the right, you can see with the subsurface irrigation, they're doing much better. And then just determine your landscape style: formal, contemporary, lush and efficient, more traditional, more natural looks, using rocks and cacti in various areas, as well as artificial turf. And then develop your plant list of materials. And don't forget all the different types of rock that can also be a big part of the landscape. And this is just my ending slide here. On the right is more of a proper job of pruning versus the left improper. This is the time of year trees are being pruned. So please work with your maintenance people to ensure the plants are properly maintained. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. I also appreciate that both you and our previous speakers gave us their PSAs about what's important. So yes, we don't like to see those trees hacked up like that. It's proper pruning techniques that keep them living long and looking beautiful. Thank you for everything you shared on design. There's so much wonderful information there. And so many different opportunities. And in some of your renderings, I saw some artificial turf, which is a nice segue to our next speaker. We have Dan Bond with the Synthetic Turf Council. He actually is on the East Coast, so we welcome him from afar. And he has done so much as the CEO there, and we've been very fortunate to work with him a few times in the past as well. And with that, Dan, if you could pop up and give us a little bit of information on synthetic turf options, we'd love to hear about them.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and your previous panelists as well. It's wonderful to see the incentives for installing synthetic turf, especially when the application, it makes a lot of sense in a desert climate. So here I go. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about removing natural grass and installing synthetic turf. A little overview of the Synthetic Turf Council, which I'm the CEO of. and some of the programs that we do in order to promote the industry and educate end users and people who are more interested in learning more about it. Benefits of landscape turf, some of the resources that we have available for you, and of course, most importantly, what considerations you need to have when installing landscape artificial turf. So a little bit about the STC. We're based here in Washington, D.C. We're the largest organization representing the synthetic turf industry with 271 members. It's over 16 countries now. Latin America, Europe, Australia. We have a couple of members in Australia as well. And we just had our annual meeting last week, and we had an opportunity to hear about the industry in India, which is quite fascinating with 1.3 billion people. They're very, very interested in synthetic turf. If you're interested in learning more about some of the people and companies that are involved with the STC, we have an online guide. It's easy access. You could just type in which location you're in, what type of turf that you'd like to have installed, and then you could click through the directory to find the best person. We have a certified turf installer for landscape program. It's in our 3rd year now, which promotes industry best practices. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when it comes to considerations for installing landscape turf. So the benefits of turf, we've talked about this before on previous panels, and just want to highlight some of the top line numbers. It conserves billions of gallons of water every year. Obviously, you don't need to water it and concern yourself with humid conditions, dry conditions, whatever the conditions are, hot, cold. It's something that you don't need to concern yourself with. It decreases the CO2 emissions from lawn equipment. Here in the Washington, D.C. area, we have a lot of activity when it comes to lawn care professionals that go around and cut lawns, blow leaves, and so forth. And a lot of that's based on gas-powered motorized equipment. And so this application eliminates the need to put all of those harmful CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. It also eliminates pesticides and fertilizers as well. Obviously, you don't need a nice green grass to grow with those nasty chemicals. It's always green, and it's something that is there when you install it. Promotes year-round activity on a safe, durable surface. As you can see, children and pets and loved ones can run around and have a nice, even surface, not worry about pets or young ones twisting an ankle. And of course, it eliminates the majority of the yard work. Some people actually do. I have talked to people that like yard work, which is fantastic. But for a vast majority of those that I've talked to, it eliminates the need to continuously perform that yard work when you don't have to. So 2 guides that the STC has put out for folks that are interested in learning more. Synthetic Grass 360, we just updated it this year. It's a fantastic guide. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I highly encourage you to do so. I'll send the link to Ashley as well if you'd like to get more information. It highlights the uses and benefits of synthetic grass and talks about parks, playgrounds, private installations, commercial areas, all the things that you need to consider in one bite-sized guide, if you will. Then there's also the considerations when buying synthetic grass for landscape use. It's more of a technical guideline. So if you're more interested in some of the technical aspects of installing turf, I encourage you to read that one as well. Both of them are also located on the STC website, syntheticturfcouncil.org/page/guidelines. So what are the considerations you need to consider, if you will, when installing landscape turf? First and foremost, I mentioned the CTIL installer certification. I highly recommend that you select someone who's certified, that you know is going to do a job that's a quality job, that knows what they're doing, and have gone through the STC certified, certificate holder through the STC program. So all of the CTIL installers who are located across the country are located on the directory, the member directory. So if you're looking for someone who's going to install some turf in your backyard or rip up grass and install turf, I highly recommend you take a look at the directory first. That'll give you a baseline of sort of the region in which they operate. Second, I recommend that you research the manufacturer and installation company, much like you would a restaurant or a dry cleaner or any other product or service that you are going to purchase. Read up on the company and make sure that they have good reviews. Check their warranties and business record. Better Business Bureau has a record on most companies. Yelp or any type of online review. You can just do a quick Google search and type the company's name and review. That'll give you a good sense of sort of what the quality of installation would be. And I highly recommend that you visit prior installations. A lot of these companies operate in specific regions. And if there are previous installs, see how they look 6 months in, 1 year in, 5 years in, 10 years in, and see what kind of job that they did and the type of turf that was purchased in order to install in your environment. Purchase products that meet or exceed STC's minimum specifications in our technical guidelines. I mentioned the technical guideline before. There's minimum specifications when it comes to certain environments, like a desert environment. That would be different if, say, you were installing in Vancouver, British Columbia, or Hollywood, Florida, or Bangor, Maine. All of those places require different types of turf for the application and the installation in that specific region. So I highly recommend you take a look at those and map the product to the minimum specifications that are described in the technical guidelines. And then lastly, I recommend that you keep a sample of the grass that you select and make sure that the company is installing the right type of grass that you've selected. That's you would be surprised that some of the installers that might not be certified that operate like this. And so it's very important that you understand the quality and the type of grass that you want to install, the type of turf that you want to install, and make sure that you select it and keep a swatch of it to make sure that's what's being installed. So those are all the slides that I have for now. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, but thank you again to Ashley and the Desert Water Agency. Thank you again for the opportunity, and we'll wait till the end to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dan. A lot to hear about with synthetic turf. People tend to think it's very simple and very straightforward, but it does require some homework as well. So some good resources there. I placed them in the chat, the link that you mentioned for the technical guide. So anyone who needs that is welcome to it. And for our next speaker, we will be with Leisha Astorga. We're gonna take a little bit of a left turn here and go from synthetic turf over to gardening. So if you're not quite sure what to do with some of the space where you're removing grass and you are considering some vegetable gardens, Leisha is an incredible resource. We also had the opportunity to work with her on our pollinator garden not too long ago. She is the garden coordinator at Palm Springs High School and teaches sustainable gardening, and the students she works with are just amazing. The things they know and can do and have grown would blow you away. So without further ado, I will let Leisha step up and talk to you about vegetable gardening.
Thank you, Ashley. If I can get my screen shared correctly. There we go. I started this out saying your backyard garden. And I want to kind of change that out. This was kind of like just a placeholder, the name of this. And I hesitate on this because I don't want you to think that a backyard is the only place you can have a vegetable garden. You want to make sure that you have this just wherever you wherever you're going to be. A vegetable garden can be anywhere. It can be in your front yard, it can be in your side yard, it can be wherever it is that you want. You don't want to hide away that vegetable garden of yours. So moving on into the types of gardens. At grade. Now that's pretty straightforward. It is going to be at ground level. A raised bed is what we think of traditionally as a, straightforward, garden that we look at. They can be raised fairly high, or, 12 inches off the ground. Containers, in pots. Keyhole's a little bit more complicated. They look actually like a keyhole. They're kind of big, round with compost in the middle. Spiral is generally more for herb gardens. Really cool. There's a picture of one, a couple of slides in. Below grade, I mentioned it here, but it's generally used more in cold environments, but it is an interesting concept for the heat. You are putting it below ground because it's going to regulate the temperature better. So the question is, how do you choose which one of these to use? It's up to you. Now, do you have pets? Are your pets going to be running through the garden? You might want to have a raised bed. Do you have physical limitations? I personally do. So I like to have a tall bed with a wide cap on it so I can sit down and garden. Wildlife, costs. Some are more expensive, some are less. Aesthetic. Again, you don't want to have it hidden away. So you want it to match the rest of your yard. You want it to match your architecture. Does your HOA have requirements on what you can and can't have? Herbicides and pesticides. Have you sprayed something that's going to affect the ground that you want to plant that garden in? So all of those are considerations that's going to determine what type of garden. It's a personal choice. None of these are right or wrong. You can combine these. You don't have to choose either or on any of these. And site assessment is going to be key in this. Now your ideal is going to be east or south facing. Now that's ideal. Doesn't mean that's what you have to choose. My garden happens to be northwest facing, which is the exact opposite of ideal. A little bit more work, but it's what worked for my situation. So it's what I've got. You want to have 6 to 8 hours of sun. Morning sun, afternoon shade is perfect. And you want to have easy access for maintenance and harvest. That's really, in my opinion, the most important thing to look for. If it's hidden away, you're not going to know when things are ready for you to harvest them. You're not going to go out there and maintain it. And then it's just going to be a chore. And it's not going to be enjoyable anymore. And the two things that you want to happen here, you want to enjoy it and you want to get things out of it. And then I touch on microclimates. So a microclimate is a climate that differs from your larger climate in general. So if you have hot spots, cold spots, wet spots, a wind tunnel, something like that. Now, that's not inherently bad. It's just different. So you want to know what that is when you're deciding if a place is a good spot for your garden. And then here I just touch on permaculture. Permaculture is the art and science of working with nature. Now, in my opinion, that's really important with a garden in general. So I'm not going to go over each and every one of these things, but a healthy living soil is going to give you healthy plants. Healthy plants are going to resist pests and disease, which means less work for you and more harvest. Your vital components are visible organisms, earthworms, microscopic organisms, which is all that lovely stuff, the fungi, the protozoa, the bacteria, the nematodes, all of that. And those maligned organisms, the mushrooms, the ants, the bugs. Now Now, feeding your soil, not the plant. This is a thing that people, you don't need to go out and buy tomato fertilizer. You want to know what your soil needs. Certain plants take more out of the soil than other things. But if you're checking your soil, then all of that's going to get taken care of. And I have mulch written here a whole bunch of times because mulch is just so important. It's going to keep the moisture in your soil. It's going to keep weeds from your soil. It's going to help with all those organisms in your soil. In your garden, you're going to use straw for mulch. Outside of your garden, you can use whatever you like, pea gravel, bark mulch, whatever. Now you're going to know the difference between mulch and compost. If you can tell what the material is, if you can recognize it, then it's mulch. If you can't tell what it is, then that's compost. A really cool thing to do is in a vegetable garden, you don't have to just do vegetables. Mix in flowers, mix in other things, because the flowers are going to promote pollination and they're also going to distract the wildlife from your plants. And mimic nature. So what I mean by this is you want to plant a variety. So that's what we call in gardening, in vegetable gardening, companion planting. So certain things take things out of the soil, other things put things in it. Some things attract bugs, other things repel bugs. So if you mix those things up in your garden, it's going to make a much healthier ecosystem. And stair stepping. So what that means is some things like sun, some things like shade. So if you plant larger plants next to smaller plants, they're going to shade each other. And succession. You don't want all your broccoli at one time. So you want to plant it in succession with each other. And use your space. So most people have block walls in neighborhoods. So that's a perfect place for, say, a fruit tree hedgerow or protecting your cold sensitive plants. If you want tomatoes in the middle of winter, plant a tomato plant along a west facing wall. I guarantee you will have more tomatoes than you know what to do with. And right here is that spiral herb garden I was talking about. So up here, you plant your dry plants, and down here is what's going to be your more water thirsty plants. And right here's an earthworm from my garden. Right plant, right place, right time. So this is pretty self-explanatory. So if you plant the right plant, you're going to have reduced maintenance and most importantly, water. The season for us is September through June. And using trees or larger plants, like I said a minute ago, to create shade. So deciduous trees like fruit trees, those are great. And the right place. Again, put it where it likes to grow. So most herbs can tolerate shade, except for oregano and basil. They like full sun. And raised beds here. Now this is talking about what to do in two particular beds, like raised beds and containers. Those are the most common that you're going to do. So when I say 50-50 native compost, you're going to do 50% native soil, 50% compost. And if you don't have native soil to add in, plaster sand is an excellent substitute. So instead of going and buying that at your hardware store, I would suggest you get it at, say, a Rock Supply, someplace like that. And when we go down here into Lasagna Gardening, which that's a really cool way if you do deep beds like I do. Look at, like if you're going to do it like 3 foot tall, the Lasagna Gardening makes it a lot easier. And when I say brown and green, brown is something that is dead. Green is something that is recently dead. And so you're going to layer that. And then this top 6 inches is going to be your 50% native and compost. And then you're going to cover it with 3 inches of straw. And you don't want a raised bed to be any less than 12 inches tall or more than 4 feet wide. You can't access any wider than 4 feet from both sides. And containers, again, you're looking at 50% native, 30% soilless mix, which is basically potting mix, and then 20% compost. The benefit of containers is you can move them around as you need to, and they'll contain big or unruly plants like mint. And then aesthetics. I mean, I like to mix my containers in with my raised beds. Now the big question, how do you start? Are you going to use seeds or starts? Now starts are plants that have already started growing that you're going to buy, you know, at the store. So seeds are more economical. They're, you know, going to continue giving you seeds. They tend to be stronger. You get more variety. But starts, they're instant and they're convenient. So this is absolutely a personal choice, completely up to you. Fruit trees, real quick on fruit trees, because a lot of people don't have room for these. These are the ones that work well for our desert. Chill hours, you want to look at less than 300 hours chill. So that means, I don't remember the exact temperature, but it's like 36 degrees or something. We have less than 300 hours of 36 degrees. You want to keep it short, 8 to 10 feet tall, so you can actually harvest from it. And they make, the ones that I've highlighted make excellent hedgerows, like apple, citrus, mulberries. So when you make a hedgerow, you want to plant the trunks about 5 feet apart. And that's going to, say, against a block wall, it's going to basically replace, say, oleanders, you know, something like that. And for your planting, citrus, you're going to plant in October, and your soft fruit, which is exactly what it sounds like, peaches and apricots, things that you can, like, say, pierce. And your tropicals, you're going to plant those in January. And a key for fruit, soft fruit, you want to have those ripened and off the tree by July. That's why a lot of apple varieties don't work out here. They tend to ripen, you know, more in the fall. Now, when we look at our benefits, I think those are pretty self-explanatory. One thing I found out recently, which I find extremely interesting, produce can lose its 30% of its nutritional value in 3 days. That's insane. So, and speaking of the students I work with, I have found that a lot of them had never eaten a lot of the vegetables that we grew, but once we grew it, they ate it. And the sense of accomplishment. I've been growing, I can't even tell you how many years. I mean, it's probably 30 years I've been growing vegetables. And I still get giddy when I bring stuff in for dinner each night. And then this is probably my biggest tip. You are going to fail. That's not negative. That's just, I fail all the time. It's just what it is. That's okay. You learn from it and you move on. You want to start small, plant what you eat, what you like, and then you expand. And as I said earlier, don't hide your garden. Make it someplace you enjoy, not just someplace that you're going to work in, and use those plant volunteers. Volunteers are plants that grow on their own from seeds that just disperse. They're the strongest plants you've got. And lastly, this is really important, make sure you install a separate irrigation valve for your vegetable garden. You are not going to use the same irrigation that you do in the rest of the yard. Vegetable gardens, they can be water efficient, but they are going to require more water than, say, your desert landscape. And that is everything from my presentation. I know I went really, really quickly, so hopefully you got everything. Thank you.
Well, and I just want to remind folks, if you have any questions for Alicia or for any of our other panelists, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we will hopefully have ample time to get to those at the end. Thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank
Every
you.
time I talk to you, I want to go out and get my gardening gloves on and start something new. So, and it's perfect because this is a great time of year to start getting things in the ground. And Vicky in the chat shared the planting guide that Leisha put together with her students. Tried and true, best times of year to plant different plants. So thank you for providing that resource. And you know, that's a great thing for anyone interested in a vegetable garden or even thinking about one for the future to look at. So we are going to pop over to our final speaker, Jesse with Pro Landscaping. He was actually raised here in the Coachella Valley, and he started lawn care at age 11 behind the mower. So he's got decades of experience beyond his years. And you know, Pro Landscape does tons of business across the Coachella Valley, and we've seen many of their projects approved through our incentive program. So thank you so much, Jesse, for taking the time to talk with folks about probably the most common replacement for grass, which is desert landscaping.
Hi, Ashley, thank you for having me. I want to thank you, WA. It's a privilege to be here, to be part of the panel. I'm very happy to be here. I enjoy living here in the Valley. I love doing landscaping, and you're right, I've been doing it for a long time. This is a family business, and you know, I've been in it, involved for, you know, like I'm saying, for a long time. I'm going to share my slides here, so just give me 1 second here, and then I will continue with the presentation. So I live in the Valley, but I do have a degree from the University of California. My brothers and I started Pro Landscaping in 1999. We have 100+ employees. I'm a certified arborist. I've been the CEO of this company for 24 years. Our company services golf courses, HOAs, private residences. We also are date growers, palm growers, and we own our own nursery. The topic of discussion, why I got invited to bid, is what to expect when hiring a landscape professional. What are the benefits of hiring a landscape professional? What are the options for desert landscape and the landscape installation process? I highly suggest that if you're going to have a project, whether it be your house or a commercial setting, a building, or a big project for an HOA, is that you hire a landscape professional that has the experience, because that person will guide you, a solid reputation, and that offers support. And more importantly, you need to hire a landscape professional that you partner with. These projects are very costly, so that you need to make sure that you put a team together so that you can be successful. You don't want to fail. You don't want your plans to fail. You don't want a landscaping project that doesn't have the curb appeal, you know, after a year or after 2 years. So it's very important. What are the benefits of hiring a landscape professional? You will have specialized labor and supervision, equipment. Big projects require having the right equipment. Also, you need somebody that can keep, you know, the work in progress so that you can meet DWA deadlines. I have been called into jobs where I need to come in with my company to finish the job so that the DWA can, you know, the DWA deadlines can be met and people can finish those projects. You don't want to be faced with that, where you have somebody that comes in and they can't get the job done. Very important is that you have a contractual agreement with a licensed contractor in case that you have to, you know, you need that, hold that contractor liable. You want that contractor to be licensed, to be bonded and insured. Options for desert landscaping. We installed the landscaping designed by Mr. Tom Dawsey. He's the landscape architect. He spoke here. You can see that that is about 2 years in, and look how beautiful that landscaping looks. That used to be all grass. So, you know, he does very good, beautiful work, and we've installed some of his projects. You know, as he mentioned, there are so many different ways, you know, different designs, and he really gave a really good presentation as to the design. So this is some of the work that we have done in the Coachella Valley for different HOAs. This is Canyon Sense also, but we've done a lot. We've installed mature palms for hotels, you know, for golf courses, trees. The reason I'm highlighting this is trees are very important. They provide a lot of shade. So I'm going to talk about the installation process. Once you have a design by a landscape architect or Mr. Dawsey or a designer, we normally get called, either myself or you get somebody from another company, their estimator, you will get them, and you provide them, you provide them the plans, and the landscaper will, if you have irrigation drawings, which are very important, they will provide a proposal. Once you get different proposals and you approve the proposal with the contractor that you've chosen to do the landscaping, this contractor will provide you a timeline for completion. And more importantly, the contractor will make suggestions as to how the irrigation system, the type of plants, how they need to be installed. Very important. I would consider the most important aspect of the whole installation, the remodeling of the landscaping, is the irrigation system. The irrigation system is vital because trees, cactus, and flowering drought-tolerant plants have different water requirements. So it's very important that trees be placed in their own zones. Different cactus require less water than flowering shrubs. So the contractor needs to know what kind of irrigation drip heads need to be used. Also, you also want that person to have experience on how to install trees, how to install shrubs. There are the experience you need to know how deep to install plants. You can't just put plants in the ground. So you got to have somebody that has the experience. And the process of how you're hiring a landscape professional is like hiring somebody that you want. Like, you need to interview them, make sure that you check their referrals. You may even want to visit other landscaping projects that they have installed, especially here in the Coachella Valley. We live in a drastic environment because it's so cold in the winter and it's so hot in the summer. So it's best to hire local. I want to thank everybody, and if you have any questions, please submit them. And also, please stay safe. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jesse, and what a great reminder to everybody. We've actually seen a spike in these incentive projects as people stay safe and stay home. It's one of the things that people can do to stay busy. So before we pop into Q&A, please, anyone who's still here with us, which seems like quite a number of us stuck around, so thank you. I know this was a long webinar compared to our normal one. Please put your questions in the question box. And then in the interim, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our controller and nozzle rebate program. So a lot of what was discussed today had to do with irrigation. We did see quite a few people that said that they don't have plans to convert grass. So if you do have grass and you want to be more efficient with it, or if you have some areas that you want to convert to desert landscaping or artificial turf, but others that you want to keep grass, you can use these rotary nozzles to be more efficient with your grass watering. You can also, if you have areas like shrubs or trees as part of your landscape project, use this rebate as well for pressure compensating bubblers. So the way this incentive works, it's $5 per head plus $2 per head for installation if you have them professionally installed. And for residential customers, we can give you up to 100, and commercial customers up to 1,000. And really those up tos are for normal sized yards. If you have an exceptionally large yard, let us know and we have a calculation we can run to see how many of these nozzles that we can help you with. And again, the rotary nozzles are for grass areas, and the pressure compensating bubblers are for trees and shrubs, and even some larger plants like ocotillo. And then our controller rebate, whether you're irrigating a vegetable garden or a desert landscape, or some of that remaining turf, we do have an incentive available for the timer that does that. And this isn't just a typical timer. The ones that they have nowadays are extremely accessible and frankly quite inexpensive. Both of the devices you see on the screen are under $200. One of them, the Rainbird, is typically about $150, and the Orbit is typically about $100 or $120, depending if you want 6 stations or 12. And they have a lot of great features that integrate with your cell phone. So if you have Wi-Fi at your home, it's a great option. We also there are lots of other models that have wired rain sensors and weather sensors, so that the watering can be modulated based on the temperature and weather conditions. So, we always hate driving around on a rainy day and seeing our neighbors using their sprinklers. There has to be a better way, and there is now. And this rebate is $150 for the device itself, and up to $100 for professional installation as well. That's for our single family folks. For our HOAs, we just made this incentive more lucrative for you. We will give you up to $10,000. So there is some spend requirement on your part for that, but check out our website. Again, we posted the link www.dwa.org/save in the chat a little bit earlier. So go ahead and check that out. And we'd love to work with you on these programs. And with that, it looks like we have a couple questions and such in the Q&A. Last reminder before we go into that is our coupons. We have coupons available. There are a couple artificial turf installers on here. Also a few places where you can get rocks, boulders, even nursery supplies, some of the things that we discussed today. And then in addition to that, car wash and leak detection services. And if you'd like to partner with us on a coupon and you are on the webinar as a landscape provider or something of that nature, you have some sort of water saving opportunity, please let us know. We'd love to partner with you. And with that, I invite all of our speakers back on camera. Turn your mics back on. We've got just a couple minutes here. First question we've got, will our program be active in 2021? So yes, at the very, very least, our program will be active through the end of June 2021. However, there is a limitation on funding. So if we get a big wave of funding now, requests, that means it will, even though the program will be active, we can't accept new applications. So if you are eager, especially if you have a really big project with an HOA or a commercial scale project, get those in now and we'd love to help you. Is there a limit on the amount of rebate for grass removal? No, we used to have caps on that, but it's no limit until we run out of money. So I see someone here is looking for 55,000 square feet of grass. Great. Right now we have the funding for that. I can't promise we will come even January. So please get those applications in. HOAs are considered commercial for the purposes of nozzles and can get 1,000 of them. So those are the questions that we have in the chat. Those were unfortunately all for me. So I think we will ask a few questions that we have. Oh, and look, another one popped in. So is there a good website for desert plants that are good for this area? So
No,
maybe
batalla,
Dick,
el nombre,
Patty, and Leisha, maybe you guys could speak about that.
A website?
Hmm.
Yeah, if you're aware of any online resources for desert plants.
I would say you mentioned, I don't know, in one of the chats I noticed, mentioned the guide, Lush and Efficient Landscaping, and that can be accessed online. So that would be a great place to look for. It's a great resource.
I will share that with everyone because that was in response to a specific question. So we'll get that out to every audience member, that link. And we actually have hard copies of that book available that we give out for free at Desert Water Agency. The caveat to that is our offices are closed due to COVID, but we, spoiler alert, are opening up a little library, which will be stocked with Lush and Efficient, and that will be opening in early to mid-November. So follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter to find out about when that will be open. And then you can come by and grab as many copies of those books as you need, plus other fun novels and children's books.
Ashley, one other thing I would suggest, if people are interested in that, if they visit the Living Desert or if they visit the beautiful garden in Palm Desert that is on the corner of El Paseo and 111, the plants are identified and you can see what they look like actually
Full
growing,
size.
so full size. And I would say it's really important to do that because a picture is lovely, but when you see the plant in person, you have a much better idea as to whether that's what you really want. Looking in nurseries is also good, but those two have specific native gardens, as well as up at the top at the visitor center at the top of 74. They also
Santa
have a
Rosa.
garden, the Santa Rosa place. So I would suggest those are good places to go.
I'm sure Jesse will back us up on this too, that you really need to plan ahead and not plant your yard full of stuff so that it looks good the first week, because in the first year it's going to be awful. You saw the
Yes.
difference in our pictures from the day after we had it done, and 5 years later it's taken over.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You need to plan ahead and you know, and Tom will also agree with me. You don't, you know, for cost effectiveness, and if you're doing a large yard or a large HOA, you can't be buying all, you know, big plants because it gets to be expensive. So yeah, let them, you know, give them time to grow and they're going to fill in.
Jesse, another question for you, speaking of cost effectiveness. We got someone asking about what to expect for overall project cost. I don't know what you tend to, just a very rough ballpark for people. What we see for large scale projects tends to be around $5 a square foot in terms of cost. And for single family homes, it really just depends. There's such a wide gap on that due to some of the things Tom was talking about, rock selection, big boulders, etc. So Jesse, could you speak to that a little bit?
I would say the price could range from $4 to $6, $7, depending on the elements that are chosen. Tom talked about the cost of rock material. That's where most of the money is. It's on rock material and ground cover. But now we have, you know, introduced new elements like, you know, mulch, you know, that can also be less costly. So you can, there's a lot of different things can be added. But I would say it's going to range between $4 to $6 that you can actually get these projects done.
I think that makes sense. And then Dan, someone asked about the cost for artificial turf, both the grass itself cost per square foot and then the typical cost installed. And I know it varies market to market, but just kind of a ballpark.
It does vary market to market, and it really depends on the quality of the turf. I mean, you could go a few dollars all the way up to, you know, much higher than that. So I can't speak specifically to the price, but I would say that if you are going to make this decision, take advantage of course, the rebates that DWA offers, but also in really take the time to invest in researching the type of turf that you buy. And of course, an installer like Jesse, who's knowledgeable, or someone else who obviously has done this before and knows what they're doing in this environment.
Don, if I may add, here in the Coachella Valley, the cost to install, synthetic turf is between $8 to $10.
We second Dan's information on research. Do your research. You have to look up what kind of plants you want, who's going to do it, how much water it's going to take, all the, especially the irrigation. So important.
So you're talking about $8 to $10,
Yes.
Jesse indicated, for synthetic turf. So it is a little bit higher, but do remember you'll be saving water, as people will rarely get that hose out and hose off that synthetic turf just so there's not a layer of dirt or sand or dust.
And no more mowing.
Yes, no more mowing. So you'll save on those maintenance costs as well. So lots of different options out there for people. Basically any way that you want to go, even if you're looking at putting in mostly cement or pavers, and as long as you have a little plant life in the area, we will work with you on a rebate. So we're trying over the years to be more and more flexible with people. The water savings is what matters. So if you were hesitant to apply in the past, please reconsider. We'd love to have you participate in this program, or get that grass out. And if you have questions along the way, you're certainly welcome to leave them with me, and I can connect you with any one of our speakers. We're always there. They've been so gracious with their time. So before we pop off here, we are going to throw a wrap-up poll on the screen.
Good.
So we just have a couple questions to ask people that are on the line with us about.
Actually, there was a question about the installing turf that doesn't melt in your environment. So
You want to go ahead and handle that?
Yeah. So really quickly, two things. One, the type of the yarn really impacts the melting point. So for example, a nylon yarn would have a much higher melting point than, say, polyethylene or polypropylene. It gets back to my original question about researching the company, researching the turf. Make sure you understand that it's appropriate for your environment. We also have, it's interesting, we just did a webinar on this topic about reflective light from desert environments that comes off of windows that amplify the sun's power and the UV radiation that comes from the sun. So you really need to have an installer that understands how light shines basically throughout the year at its hottest points, and where the turf is going to be installed. And you can't have turf in certain areas because the reflective light is going to make, it's going to bake it. It's just going to be 160, 170 degrees with a temperature gauge, and you're not going to be able to have anything there, let alone, synthetic turf. So it's very important to know sort of where your house is placed when it comes to where you want to install the turf, because that greatly impacts how you're going to enjoy it out there.
That's a great point, and you're right. It's not just synthetic turf that affects. You certainly don't want to put a vegetable garden in the path of a light ray like that. I happen to have 3 of them in my backyard, and they travel across the pool and up the wall, and you can even see on the wall there's a line, from where it has been sun damaged. So the desert sun is no joke. It is very serious. So there's a couple questions in the chat, Dan. I'm hoping you can answer those in the chat while we do this wrap-up poll here.
Sure.
I want to know from folks, do you plan to remove grass and replace it with artificial turf, a veggie garden, desert landscape, maybe a mix, all of the above, or none of the above? You're going to keep your grass. And then 2, do you plan to take advantage of an incentive? 3, did you learn something new today? I certainly did. So the options there are yes, you did. A lot of new things, maybe 1 or 2, or nope, You're a pro. You didn't learn anything new today. And then lastly, how did you hear about this webinar? Was it through our email, social media, friend or colleague? We'd love to know how so we can better reach folks in the future. We're going to give you about 10 seconds more on that, and then we will pop the results up on the screen for you all to take a look at. All right, desert landscape. It looks to be the
Yay.
predominant choice here, or a mix, and artificial turf. I don't see anyone who's going to do a vegetable garden. I don't know how that
I
could
am.
possibly be
I
after
will. I am.
after that presentation from Leisha. I know. I just want to
I am.
go start picking things that I haven't even planted yet and eat them for dinner. So I think hopefully we will get some folks who are not too intimidated by that process in the near future. And it seems like only one person on the whole webinar knew everything that he heard today. So I'm sorry we didn't learn anything new for you. You're always welcome to come back for more, and hopefully all of the guides and information we shared in the chat will have some new information too. And then it looks like our emails are what got to people. So thank you so very much for all of your time today, to our incredible panelists. This is probably the best group we've ever had.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. And this webinar will be up on Desert Water Agency's website. It will be up on social media, on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you saw something you liked and you want to share it with another HOA board member or a friend or a colleague, please share. And thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and sign off.
Thank you,
Take care,
Ashley.
guys. Stay
Thank
safe.
Thank you, Ashley.
Bye.
Thank you.